Hey guys, this is my 50th video, and I can't believe I've made that many videos because I can't believe there are that many interesting things in the world that I've wanted to comment on, and you've stuck around to watch. So the world is interesting, I guess we can take from that. But I've been recently thinking about an idea that I wanted to save for something big, and I guess 50th video is kind of big, so um, we'll talk about it. And recently I've been thinking about the Euthyphro Dilemma. And for those who are unfamiliar, it's the question that Socrates asks Euthyphro in Plato's story, um, where the two men are talking about objective morality, and they're basically critiquing the gods of their time for being fallible morally. And the question Socrates asks is, um, are things that a god or gods command good because they command them, or is it because they're good that the gods command them? In other words, are things good because God does them, or does God do good things because they're good? And so, if you'll notice, both horns of the argument are unfortunate for theists, because on one hand you've got uh, God chooses which actions and commands are good, which makes them heavily subjective, completely subjective. And on the other horn, you've got God is appealing to this outside external source of goodness, uh, as a sort of standard outside of himself, and theists can't have that. So uh, I've been checking out the responses of theists. William Lane Craig. I checked out a little video back and forth between Sisyphus Redeemed and Epidemic 2020. You should check out their channels because they're interesting. But they had a little bout about the Euthyphro Dilemma, as well as Theoretical Bullshit's input, which I thought was really valuable. But I've been doing a lot of thinking about it, and I think I agree with what Sisyphus Redeemed said, in that whenever you try to show the Euthyphro Dilemma to be a false dilemma, and propose a third option, it always collapses back down into that original dilemma, or it goes somewhere you don't want it to go. You being the theist in the situation, and I'll elaborate on that now, because the proposed response to the dilemma, does God do things because they're good, or are they good because God does them? The dilemma is proposed to be false, in that there's a third option where God's nature is good. His very essence is goodness. And so God neither gets goodness from an outside standard or source, nor does he just arbitrarily choose which actions are good. Rather, his nature is good. So there's that bullet dodged. But as Sisyphus Redeemed said, that doesn't quite get you out of the thicket, because what you've now got to explain is the nature of God's nature, which is God's nature good because God has control over his nature and made it good, which makes it subjective, or is God's nature good because it's appealing to this outside standard that makes natures good? And I have seen responses from people on YouTube, and as I said, William Craig, and I didn't find their responses adequate at all, and I'll explain why. Because one of the responses I heard was that God's nature is neither of those things, and that it's necessary, it's essential, but it's not contingent on anything because God has existed forever. But it's not arbitrary. This is impossible. Assuming God's been there forever, his nature cannot be contingent on anything, because it's literally been there since before anything could have been there to control what its nature is. So God's nature cannot be contingent if it's eternal. That being said, it cannot be necessary. it can't be necessary because there can be nothing that determines the necessity of God's character. Uh, if it is truly eternal, there could have been no set of rules which made God's nature be a certain way. It just doesn't work that way. You can't have it God's nature be not contingent and also be necessary, because that doesn't make any sense. Um, and maybe I'm interpreting these terms differently. I'm not big in philosophy like some people are, but this leads me to believe that if this is true, God's nature is truly arbitrary. If nothing can control it from the outside, but God didn't control it, and it's not contingent on anything, then literally it could be anything. I mean, nobody has control over it, which is necessarily, it's just random. So the way I see it, if this is true, God's nature must either be arbitrary, either that, or God gets his morality from some external source. He gets his goodness of nature from some external source, or God is completely random in that whenever he makes moral judgments, it's just to do with the random order that his characteristics were given to him. And so I don't think any of these situations is pleasant to a theist. Either God's moral direction is arbitrary because it's random, because it's not contingent on anything, or God gets his goodness from an external source. And that's basically the limit of where I took the dilemma. And I would like to offer a challenge in the conclusion of this, where I challenge a theist who thinks that my analysis of the dilemma, or others' analyses of the dilemma, are insufficient to get rid of objective morality. I offer the challenge to present a God's objective morality in a way that forces you not to say that God's nature is good because his nature is good, because that's circular and you will get nowhere. But I'm proposing that any attempt to fix the dilemma from the point that I took it to would reveal that God's objective morality is ultimately circular, in that you have to go all the way to the end and say God was there first. If his nature doesn't comply by any rules or by any external power, nor God's choice, it must just be that it's good because it's good. And so I think ultimately the support for the Euthyphro Dilemma from the theist side ends up being a circular argument for God's source of objective morality, which is the same as me saying I am the source of ultimate objective morality because I am the source of ultimate objective morality, which is logically meaningless, and it doesn't really do anything. So I very much look forward to hearing what people's responses are, because I really don't see a way around this for theists. But like I said, I would love to find a way around it, because it's super interesting. Because the Euthyphro Dilemma seems to me to be more powerful than, say, the omnipotence paradox, where people say, well, omnipotence omnipotence is a flawed idea, or like or they like come up with these poor excuses to sort of skirt around the logic. But this one I don't think you can get out of so easily, and I will defend it heartily, because I don't really see any way that someone who believes in a God can maintain that God can have objective morality from anywhere, besides an external source that just is, or which is outside of God. So let me know what your responses are from both atheists and theists alike. I'm very interested, because this is an awesome dilemma. And yeah, 50 videos. So thank you for watching all my stuff thus far. I'm sorry you had to suffer through the grime and muck of my opinions. But thank you for sticking by me. I will be sure to be putting out more interesting things if you find this kind of stuff interesting like I do. So yeah, have a good day.